Good morning, everyone. I hope you're having a good day. On behalf of the Financial Security for All community, we're pleased to welcome you to this webinar. I do want to put, just let you know, next month the webinar is on June 29th, and we'll be talking about what extension professionals say about teaching health insurance. And this is a result of a survey that the presenters conducted last fall, and so we'll share the results and then talk about some other events that are coming up related to teaching health insurance. But today, we're talking about starting over after foreclosure, and we're very pleased to have our colleagues from Michigan State Extension presenting about some of the work that they've done. And we have Erica Tobe, Assistant Professor and Extension Specialist, Brenda Long, Senior Extension Educator, and Scott Matteson, Extension Educator. And so I will let them take over, starting now.
Okay, well, welcome everybody today. We are really happy to present to you a little bit about our Starting Over After Foreclosure Toolkit and some of the resources that we have done. Just to let you know, this toolkit was actually developed with National Mortgage Settlement dollars, and as a result, we were able to work with a variety of partners to be able to put this toolkit together. And so I just want to make sure that we recognize those partners. Specifically, I want to make mention to some of our extension colleagues working with University of Illinois Extension, University of Minnesota Extension, and also University of Nebraska Lincoln Extension. There's some wonderful resources that had previously been developed related to financial education or working with individuals after disaster. And this specifically was definitely a disaster that we went through within our economy. And so just wanted to make sure that I did recognize that. Another major partner that we worked with was NeighborWorks America, and you'll see a lot of their housing education materials that were really repurposed for this toolkit and for this use. So just to start off really quick in the chat box, just to kind of get a feel for everybody that's here today, I want to find out what obstacles have families in your communities dealt with since the Great Recession. So if you could use that chat box that is showed up and be able to provide some of the obstacles that you have actually seen in your community related to financial challenges. Okay, so seeing lack of a living wage, lack of jobs, unemployment, underemployment, rebuilding credit, slow in the recovery. That's something that we have seen a little bit in Michigan as well. High medical costs. There's actually a lot of research that looks at medical issues and the relationship with foreclosure and housing instability, which is really interesting. Definitely unemployment as well. So that's something that we are definitely seeing as a result here in Michigan too. What about family financial challenges? So given what we've seen with the recession, what family financial challenges have actually produced as a result of low unemployment or, high unemployment, or thinking about medical costs, rebuilding credit? Okay, bankruptcy. Definitely making ends meet. Definitely thinking about stress and finances. That's something that we've seen a lot here. Ooh, young adults remaining in the family home. Just saw some research very recently on that more young adults are going back living with their parents. Okay, repaying debt or debt delinquencies. Okay, increasing crime, college expenses. So definitely a lot of financial challenges as far as what we're seeing as a result. And in Michigan, I just want to quickly talk a little bit about what we did in Michigan, because I think that really sets the stage for why we developed the toolkit that we did. In Michigan, at one point in time, we had a 14.2% unemployment rate, so very significantly high. And I think, just by reading the news, you can see a lot of what we've seen in the state of Michigan related to loss of manufacturing. But a lot of our foreclosures were truly related to unemployment and loss of jobs as a result of the economy. 1 in 92 homes foreclosed nationally in the recession. And one of the things that we've seen is that this is not just an urban issue. Actually, rural families were significantly affected. And in fact, the Michigan foreclosure rates tripled in rural areas between 2005 and 2010. And the interesting thing about rural communities is that many of them have limited qualified staff and lack of funding to really support the needs of families. And so that was one of the things that we wanted to do in developing this toolkit, was really meet the needs of some of these families that are also living in some rural communities where maybe services aren't as prevalent to be able to assist. So the Michigan reality is that nationally, housing counseling agencies, including MSU Extension, were funded to provide foreclosure assistance and prevention. One of the things that Extension does really, really well is that we try to respond to any of the crises that are happening in our community. And unfortunately, in the state of Michigan, high foreclosure was a huge issue. MSU Extension had been involved in providing homebuyer education for many, many years. And so this was just a continued extension to a lot of the things that we did. And between 2008 and 2013, our extension staff counseled 6,500 households. And really, that was just in 3 or 4 communities that we really saw a lot of these high foreclosures occurring as a part of the work. And this was for mortgage as well as tax foreclosure. In fact, a lot of the foreclosure clientele that we're seeing right now is because of property tax foreclosure as a result. Michigan is also designated as the hardest hit state. So as a result, there was additional funding that actually came as a part of that. And then we also had, we were the recipient of $20 million in our state through the National Mortgage Settlement Dollars. And in working with our state legislator, MSU Extension was actually appropriated to receive $5 million of that. And we are just wrapping up that funding source as a result. So a lot of what you're seeing here in some of the research that we did and some of the work that we did really came out as a result of the support that we received from that. So housing counseling experience in Michigan, some of you may be familiar with what a family goes through, but they may receive a notice of foreclosure. They learn about counseling from some source. It could be a government website. It could be word of mouth. It could be a lender referral that is letting people know about it. They contact the housing counseling agency. They're assigned a counselor, and then they go through a series of intake documentation to determine the paperwork and any necessary documents that they need. The family then attends an informational meeting about the agency to understand the process, find out where they are in the foreclosure timeline. They develop a workable budget, an emergency budget to figure out what do they need to be able to start to address the issue at this particular point. And then the counselor will work with the lender and with the family to try to determine how they can potentially resolve the situation, whatever that resolution may be. It may be just supporting that particular family through the foreclosure process, or it may be trying to be able to help them think about a loan modification or renegotiating their loan. Then the housing counselor, lender, and family determine the appropriate action. And at that point, once a housing outcome is identified, that relationship actually stops. And so one of the things that our extension offices really found is that people were going through these services, they were getting the education, they were determining whatever that housing outcome was, but then they had to go home and they had to figure out how they were going to figure out their financial situation at that particular point. And there wasn't really any financial education out there that was addressing this issue of really helping people where they were at that particular point to try to be able to figure out, how do I now repair my credit? Or how do I live within a budget now that I've foreclosed my home and I've moved out of my situation? Or maybe, where do I go to live? You know, I've been living with a family member. I need to figure out a new place. Where do I go for help? And so that was really what happened as a result, is that there wasn't an educational piece that was developed to really meet the needs of families at that particular point. So our team really made sure, and kind of thinking about this, we heard from our staff saying, we need resources. We need information to be able to help support people. We don't have the type of resources available. And so we started identifying, okay, what are some of the key outcomes that we need to have? What's the curriculum out there? And some of those curriculums that we really tapped were some of the partners that we were working with, like University of Illinois Extension, University of Minnesota, trying to determine, okay, what's already out there and how would we maybe need to reframe this to really support the foreclosure issue. We drafted toolkit units, and then we also went and talked to families, and we did some qualitative interviews to identify what are the needs that you had. And we actually talked to families that were in the foreclosure process at that particular point, and we talked to past clientele who maybe had worked with us even 3 years later to try to determine what were some of the needs that you needed as you were going through this process. We incorporated the feedback. We talked with key partners such as other counseling agencies, legal representation, to make sure that we were incorporating the right amount of information that we needed. and then we really pull these materials together. So a little bit about the research that we did. We really wanted to talk to families, and we wanted to talk to families who were actually in our housing counseling program to identify what financial pieces did you need, what types of support did you need to be able to help you in your situation. And we actually gave them a variety of different topics that our staff had really generated to try to figure out, okay, what are some of the topics that you need and what would be the priority given your situation? We also talked to them about a preferred method of receiving educational materials and really try to get a feedback on the services that they received and what other support they may have needed. And so what we heard from these families is that we needed to understand the unique experience. People were coming into foreclosure at so many different points. They may have destroyed their credit situation. Maybe they stayed in their home or waited too long. Other people were very emotionally attached, and so they had very strong feelings towards their home. They had a loss of memories. They had that loss of that physical attachment. We had other people that didn't have that strong of attachment, and so everyone had a unique experience. Some people had medical issues that they were dealing with at the same time. Some people had lost their job, and so as a result, their financial position had been okay, but all of a sudden they lost their job and they now weren't able to make their mortgage payment. So we had to figure out what are some situational appropriate support that we can give and how can we really address this within this toolkit framework. We wanted to understand one's financial situation after services and connect them to local resources. So one of the things that when a client goes through their action plan and kind of ending their relationship is we try to identify resources. But we wanted to be able to identify resources that were going to help them, support them at that particular point, as well as after they left services and they're maybe in a different financial situation. And so really pointing them to what are some local resources that you can use. One of the things that we found with this resource is that many people had never used social service agencies before, or they had never used local resources. And so this is a new experience for them. And so we really needed to get back to the basics of some of it. We needed to recognize that families are often coping with multiple stressors. So there's often multiple things going on. So maybe they lost their job and they had a health condition. Or maybe there was multiple family members living in the home, and so there was some stressful situations along with that. And so understanding that there's oftentimes multiple stressors, and we have to recognize all those different pieces within that. And then including situation-appropriate language and multiple delivery modes. Many of these individuals didn't want to go to a general money management class. They had already done that. They had already gone through foreclosure counseling. They needed something that was going to be specific to them at that particular position. And they didn't want the full gamut. They really wanted that particular question that they needed answered at that particular stage. And so we really kind of developed this toolkit with that in mind. So a couple of things that we heard from families, they need to be able to better communicate with their lenders, okay? And so thinking about how can you communicate, what are some of the things that we need to think about, we had to be able to put that in there. Reducing debt and establishing financial security, so getting people back to a particular financially stable situation was really important. Locating new housing and understanding housing options. Being able to cope with this, not only physically, but emotionally and financially, and really thinking about all those different aspects and all of the emotional aspects that go with the loss of losing your home. Recognizing local resources and support services, and then dealing with that unique stigma of foreclosure. People felt like even though they heard about it on the news, and even though they knew other people were going through it, they still felt like they were going through it on their own. And so really helping people understand that there was a lot of people going through this at that particular point, try to be able to take some of that emotion away, to be able to present information that was going to really appeal to them. So if someone had just experienced a home foreclosure in your community, what financial education concepts might they be in need of? If you could use the chat box to provide some information here, that would be great. Okay, so rebuilding credit. And that was definitely something that we had to think about. You know, how are you going to rebuild your credit? Understanding that people were in various stages of that particular process. Decision making is huge. So what are some of the decisions that you have to make now as a result of the process? and how are you going to go about that thinking in making those actual decisions. Okay, looking at budgeting, thinking about taxes and the tax implications, and that's definitely something that we had to incorporate because this is a unique situation for a lot of people. Okay, so securing housing now, very, very important. And, you know, what are the options? One of the things that a lot of people felt is that they had very limited housing options and not understanding where they could go. And so really kind of helping people understand what are some of the options that you may have and what are some of the things that you may want to start to think about. Okay, yeah, rebuilding the foundation for their daily finances. Really trying to think about, okay, given what you have going on, what are some of the pieces, the elements that we have to rebuild? And credit may be one. It may be just developing a workable budget. It may be thinking about what are the assets in my family and what can we contribute together. People's situation were definitely affected, and so kind of thinking about that and rebuilding that as a family is sometimes very, very important. And then, yeah, reestablishing savings and emergency planning, getting organized. You're going to see that was a huge thing. Where's your important family papers, and you know, how can we really keep tabs on what we have? So all of these are really good elements, and this was really the strategy that our staff took to think about. Okay, so if we were going to develop a curriculum that was really going to be focused around financial education and foreclosure and helping people recover after foreclosure, what are some of the things that we need to think about? And so that was really the stance that we took with this material. So the Starting After Foreclosure Toolkit is really designed to help people where they're at that particular stage. There's actually 8 units that we've developed, and they're all freestanding units that anybody can access as a downloadable PDF on our website. And if you go to mymoneyhealth.org, it's mymoneyhealth.org, you can actually download the material and be able to access what these are. And this is really meant to be when people actually need them at that particular point. So for instance, if somebody is trying to figure out how to develop a spending plan and think about what are the pieces that go through, they can actually click on the Assessing Your Financial Situation. So this is not a start to finish curriculum that somebody is going to complete. That would be something that they could do, but it was really meant to meet people based on where they were at in their particular situation and really meet that just-in-time financial education of really helping them where they're at. And what we hope is that people will come to this whenever they need additional information. So if they want to learn more about credit, they can go to the Rebuilding Your Financial Situation and Credit History. If they need to figure out what a housing option might be, they can go to Finding a Place to Call Home. So really it's trying to figure out where they're at and what they need at that particular time. So what the toolkit can do, well, we hope that it can offer support for making financial decisions and give people options, because a lot of times people going through foreclosure, they're feeling like their options are very limited. So we want to be able to open up those options and really provide support so that they can think about how they're going to start to reestablish their financial situation. We really want to help determine next steps in housing and foreclosure, okay? And so really understanding that they've just gone through a very emotional time, really thinking about what they're going to do. So what are some of the next steps that people can take, and how can they really establish their situation? We want to give human service professionals a point of discussion for assisting clients. We have actually promoted this toolkit to a variety of different social service agencies, housing counselors, realtors. Last Friday, we did an event for legislators and letting aides from our Senate and House of Representatives understand how they can help their constituents. So we're really trying to get this out to as many different groups as possible, financial institutions as well, so that they can then work with families if they're going through this particular point. And then provide needed support and direction when experiencing housing instability. And somebody doesn't have to go through foreclosure to be able to use this, but anybody who's dealing with any kind of housing instability, this can be a resource that they may be able to use. And so what we feel like Extension's niche is that we can support clientele of housing counseling agencies after services end. And this is really where we felt like the system has kind of failed people in a way, because we have all these steps to the point of somebody going through foreclosure. But after foreclosure, there really isn't any follow-up for these families. There really isn't that catch-up point to be able to say, how are things going? And that was really a loss that a lot of the participants said, is that we feel like we needed the support beyond that time where our housing outcome had a resolution. And so we feel like this toolkit and this resource can be that support and offer that support for families after the services end. So a little bit about what this toolkit has. We have general extension information really with a foreclosure twist. It is a research-based resource, but we use multiple learning strategies, even though this is just in a toolkit format. There's handouts that families can complete. They can actually save them as a downloadable PDF and be able to use it as a resource even after they have completed that particular item. There's handouts, there's checklists, so there's different information. We actually have triad activities, so there's prompts for people to be able to complete as they're going through the toolkit. So we're really trying to give people not only a resource, but a worksheet handout that people can use to be able to reevaluate as they're going to go through. So at this point, I'm going to pass it on to Scott Matteson, who's going to talk with you about the first couple chapters of our toolkit, and then Brenda Long is going to talk a little bit about the rest of the chapters, and then we're going to finish up with talking a little bit more about how we're actually going to use this curriculum. So I'm going to turn it over to Scott.
So the first unit in the toolkit is getting a fresh start after foreclosure. And this unit covers how home foreclosure affects a family's finances. And then it also lays out the steps it takes to start to rebuild. So it'll help a family identify their strengths and recognize their needs and identify strategies that they can use to help them cope with change. So for example, as you can see on the slide, there are worksheets within this unit that will help families discuss their strengths and then find their qualities, what qualities they can use as assets to assist them. Also, as you see in the bottom down here, it helps to prioritize financial liabilities and bills, and then also identify needs and versus wants and what the difference is. The next chapter in the toolkit is reimagining your future and what directions do you want to go. So this chapter focuses on identifying family values and creating effective coping mechanisms, along with developing communication and problem-solving skills. We believe that all these were essential elements in achieving financial success. So, and then as you can see within the toolkit here, there's worksheets that will help families identify stresses and also how to cope with them. It'll help to build and establish SMART goals, and then how to deal with conflict along with dealing with those stresses. All those are in worksheets and handouts within this chapter.
And one thing I just want to mention real quick, some of these resources on here actually come from a Michigan State University Extension curriculum called RELAX, which is really focusing on stress management. And so what we did is we took a lot of that stress management and communication, family communication resources, and really put a foreclosure twist on it. So you'll see at the top it talks about how stress affects you. And so thinking about how stress may affect you after you've gone through foreclosure, and what are some of the things that you may need to think about. And a lot of times, especially with foreclosure, they're dealing so much with the financial aspects that they don't always think about the stress that is actually causing them in an emotional way. And so this was something that we heard specifically from the participants who had gone through our program 3 years earlier, and they were just starting to realize how much stress they actually had as they were going through the foreclosure experience. And so we really wanted to use a lot of those resources in looking at that, talking about how to fight fairly as you're communicating with your family. How are you negotiating some of those decisions? And thinking about the sources of stress that you may have. A lot of times we don't always think about those issues.
Okay, thanks, Erica and Scott. We're going to move on to the next unit on assessing your financial situation. This one goes over the basic financial education steps that many of us teach. It includes topics like setting bill priorities, living with less income, how do you determine your net worth, figuring out your debt, and how to save money, and ends with managing money and a little bit on that family communication. And we really thank the University of Illinois Getting Through Tough Times and the University of Minnesota for their disaster recovery toolkit for this unit and the next one as well. Okay, so rebuilding your financial situation and credit history gets into understanding the income tax implications of going through foreclosure. There have been a few instances where lenders will come back at a homeowner for debt repayment even after they move out of the house, or if there's a remaining balance on their mortgage. And then it also goes over the basic credit report and credit score information and how to rebuild that after it's been hit because of the foreclosure on the credit report. And then we also include some resources like legal aid and credit repair if those are what a family determines that they need to help them rebuild and recover. Another unit is on finding a place to call home. Many homeowners have lived in their home for many years, and then all of a sudden they find themselves in the foreclosure situation. So maybe it's been a long time, or they've never had to find another place to live. So there's some questions that they can ask to help their decision on when is the best time to move, thinking about the rental costs and moving expenses, whether or not they need time to look and where they are emotionally if they are ready. Or not, if they want to just stay in the house. In Michigan, generally there's a 6-month redemption period that they can use to focus and decide when's the best time to move. We also talk about the whole rental process, what their needs and wants are in one of the checklists, and there's also a section on land contracts that may be an option for some folks, but we also caution about some of the positive and negative aspects of land contracts. This unit, knowing your rights and responsibilities, really goes over the legal aspects in Michigan, a basic definition of terms, what is the redemption period, what are the options even during that 6 months to sell the property, possibility of a deed in lieu, which is basically turning over the keys to the lender with a written agreement that you leave the house in good condition before the end of the redemption period. What about the option of bankruptcy? And again, we do include some foreclosure prevention resources, and there are HUD housing agencies nationwide that might be able to help a family locally. This next unit is about getting prepared, getting organized. Erica mentioned it earlier. It's that basic record-keeping system, thinking about if a family moves, where are their important papers, if they, sometimes they move several times in a fairly short period, that they might need to replace some information, you know, birth certificates, you know, bank accounts, all that kind of thing to know what they have and what they need. So there's some great fillable worksheets here that that they can download onto their computer and fill them in and have that to go forward. And then the 8th unit is on returning to homeownership. This one talks about the advantages of renting versus buying. Some families may enjoy renting and continue that, or others might really want to return to homeownership. So it goes over assessing your financial situation, understanding what new debt you can afford, and then there's also some worksheets on determining the kind of home that's right for me. A home buyer's wish list, house hunting checklist, and neighborhood checklist. Generally, it's around 3 years after foreclosure before a conventional lender or FHA will look at a borrower for another mortgage because they usually need time to rebuild their credit. So, so this helps them understand that.
And one of the things to know with this particular unit is this is a great unit to dovetail into a homebuyer education class. And that's really a lot of the foreclosure counseling, housing counseling agencies actually also offer money management, and then they also offer housing education, pre-purchase education programming. And so we're really tailoring this so that this would be a precursor. So it kind of lets people start to think about, okay, when can I start to think about purchasing a home? And then they may actually elect to take a pre-purchase education class to be able to become a homeowner again and feel confident in being able to do that. So that's really what we've told in talks with housing counseling agencies about, is that this is kind of a pre-opportunity for people to kind of start to think about that process.
So for the participants online today, we've got a couple of questions I'd like you to answer in the chat box. How would you use this material, and who do you think in your community needs to know about this?
You know, and one of the things, while people are putting their comments in, you know, one of the things that sometimes people chuckle at this is they say, well, gee, this is just a general financial education curriculum. But it's really a general financial education curriculum with that foreclosure twist. And so, like Brenda was talking about, what are the tax issues you have to think about as you go through a foreclosure? So on the surface, a lot of it looks like a general financial education material. However, there's some intricacies and questions and things for people to think about as they're also going through this process as well.
So I see Becky said she sees workshops being offered, and I will note, Becky, that I agree that you can do workshops, but for example, in my area being such a rural area and being so small town, people tend to know each other, and it seems to be very embarrassing for people to attend a workshop. But not that in urban areas you couldn't.
Yeah, and you know, what's really interesting with that, and a lot of the participants that we talked about, they had said, we've already gone through workshops. We already gone through counseling. The other thing that we heard from people is we're super, super busy. We're trying to make ends meet. We're trying to figure out how to deal with it. So if we had a resource that we could go to whenever we needed it, that would be the best that we can do. So And we're going to talk a little bit about some of the things that we're doing with this to make it not just a toolkit, but we're doing some online classes as well that are non-credit courses, and we're turning each of these toolkits into these online classes that people can take, so to get a little bit additional information. But the one thing we've heard from families is they didn't typically want those workshops. They wanted to be able to go to it when they could.
Yeah, so, and that hits on what Elizabeth said, that she could see the material being used as a self-study. So our online class version that we're developing is a self-paced, self-study type of class.
Yeah, and Jerry mentioned, you know, thinking about this as generalizable enough for people outside of Michigan. There are some Michigan information, but usually we've tried as best we could to couple Michigan information with national information as well. So we do have some Michigan information in there, but you'll also see there's general information or there's national resources to link people to where their national source would be to be able to look at that.
Mm-hmm. So some of the possible outlets that we came up with were, you know, it's a great resource for phone counseling, especially if you have a client sitting on the other end. If they have access to their computer, direct them to the website and direct them right to the unit that they might need help with. We have trained our foreclosure counselors during their face-to-face sessions that not only is it post-foreclosure, but during that foreclosure time where somebody might be going through foreclosure, they can direct them to units. You know, for example, the stress unit, or how to have the conversations and avoid conflict with family members. So direct them right to those units. Also, sharing with local housing counseling agencies and other groups, for example, is also really great outlets. Realtors, for example, in addition, in other financial institutions, especially banks who have people going through foreclosure, they can hopefully direct them and help them and assist them along the way. In other human service professionals. And like Erica said, we met with legislators here last Friday and presented the foreclosure toolkit for them so that they can help assist their constituents.
You know, and one of the things right now, you know, our unemployment rate is really, really low in Michigan, which is good. The foreclosures are really, we're not seeing as many foreclosures as we had just a few years ago. But I think one of the things, especially our legislators and some of our agencies are seeing, is that there's some reasons why that's happening. And, you know, we've had some funding to be able to help people stay in their home. We've had some funding to be able to help pay off property tax, delinquent tax foreclosure bills. And so, you know, one of the things that we know is that this is something that hopefully, unfortunately, hopefully we're not going to see as much, but we understand that that's something that's going to happen again. And so we're really trying to kind of be preemptive to really understand, here's some of the things that we have developed that can help people. We are still having families that are dealing with situations, and so trying to be able to meet their needs as best we can and get it out to as many different groups. And the one thing that we do, we have it's free. So anybody can go download the material and be able to access the information.
And I see Becky in the chat box, you know, she states she's going to contact the local financial institutions. So, you know, they could have a client who's a month or two behind on their mortgage payment, and it could be as simple as an organization aspect. So there's the chapter on organizing and preparing that could benefit them and get them out of the situation before they get into a worse type of situation. So you guys didn't realize, but we're going to have a little quiz. So what would you do in this situation? You have an older couple has come to your money management class, and you have learned that they recently entered the foreclosure process. They have been chronically disorganized and seem to have difficulty finding their paperwork. And if you were paying attention, I gave you the answer just before I read the slide. What unit would you recommend, and how would this be useful? So in the chat box, if you could recommend the unit, and how would it be useful to them? And nobody wants to answer.
Yeah, so getting prepared, getting organized, that would definitely be one. It might be starting with getting organized too, you know, helping people kind of understand they're just going through that process, and we talk about the effects of foreclosure. We talk about the fact that, you know, there's other people, there's statistics in there to talk about there's other people going through this as well, so you're not alone, and that was one thing that we heard from a lot of people. So, you know, the one thing, and these are kind of trick questions, and I'll give you that caveat up front, is you know, there's a lot of units that could probably apply, but those two I think would be good units to be able to share with people. And really the chronically disorganized, you know, helping them start to figure out what all their things are. One of the things that we heard from people is, you know, their stuff may be in an envelope underneath a bed or in a car. You know, they're just feeling so disorganized with their life that even just finding all their important papers and putting them in one spot was a big deal. And we had educators that said people would come in with a box of paperwork, and it's just trying to figure out, okay, what do you have, and kind of start to sort through everything that they have going on.
Okay, case study number 2. You have a young married couple that's gone through a recent short sale and is excited to buy another house. They are unaware of their current credit score and the ability to purchase another home. They've come to you for advice. What units would you recommend, and how would these units be useful to this couple?
You know, it's interesting, Nancy, you asked the question about did Michigan foreclosures hit one age group or another. A lot of the families that we saw, and I did my dissertation similar around this issue, a lot of the families that we saw were older individuals, people who were in their 50s, 60s, and a lot of the things that we saw were people who actually coming into counseling, they wanted to stay in their home because of those memories that were attached. Some of the younger individuals didn't quite have that same attachment that maybe older individuals had, but we definitely saw that 50s, 60s age group going through high foreclosure. I think that also mimics kind of who we are as a state right now. We have a lot of older individuals as well. Brenda and Scott, do you want to share anything from your perspectives of what you've seen?
Most of my clients seem to be between 30 and 50 when it comes to mortgage foreclosure. Tax foreclosure seems to be all over the board. And a lot of the times with tax foreclosure, it seems to be, well, even though I said it's all over the board, it's usually seniors who have run into a medical issue and just they don't have their taxes escrowed, and they run into issues making the tax property tax payment.
Yeah, and I think we saw mostly folks in their 40s, 50s, 60s. Many companies downsized, or they had we had some manufacturing plants closed, and after a few years of trying to make it, they finally got to the point of exhausting their retirement savings, and we're still trying to hang on to their homes. We're seeing more senior citizens now who only owe property taxes but had a medical crisis, or were helping their kids, or something financially that that they couldn't afford their property taxes along with other expenses. But I do remember vividly one young family. They had 3 young children. They were probably in their late 20s, and after we went through the budget sheet, the light bulb went on for the husband. He said, "You mean if I stopped going to the convenience store every morning for a $2 cup of coffee and stopped eating lunch out every day, that I could afford my house payment. It was just a matter of doing the math and helping them understand where their money was going. And usually there's some of those kinds of discretionary expenses that they don't realize how much they're really adding up.
So getting back to our case study, really all the answers provided are correct in a way, because the issue is that we don't know what their current credit situation is, right? So it could be that they need to assess their financial situation and then start rebuilding their credit history, or maybe they've already assessed their financial situation and they've rebuilt their credit history, so now they want to return to home ownership, and so the proper chapter is returning to home ownership. So it just depends on, once you find out what that credit situation is, and where you would start. That's about all we have. So for more information, and we've mentioned our website, mymoneyhealth.org. You can download chapters and worksheets from our website. And then also coming soon, we are translating the toolkit into Spanish. Like we said earlier, we're developing a non-credit online course. It is self-paced and go at your own pace, and people can sign up for any number of units. We've developed it so that each unit of the toolkit is a separate course, so people don't have to sign up and then wade through all the various units that they don't need. They can sign up for the unit that pertains to them. And then, as Eric, go ahead.
I'm sorry, just to let you know too, the toolkit available in Spanish, we're hoping that that's going to be later this summer. The one thing that we're doing with that, it's not only going to be translated, but it's also going through a cultural relevancy. We're actually working with the Hispanic Center in West Michigan to be able to do that. So that is hopefully going to be done, and those will also be downloadable PDFs that will be on the website as well, on the same web page for people to access.
Do you, Erica or Brenda or Scott, do you want to talk about, like, if you go to Michigan, mymoneyhealth.org, and then how the navigation of that whole page works, and how maybe.
Yeah. Oh, no, that's fine. So if you do go to mymoneyhealth.org and you bring up the first page, if you look on the left-hand side, there's a list of all our programs and information that are available. And then down, maybe halfway down the page, there's a link to the Starting Over After Foreclosure. If you click on that link, the Starting Over After Foreclosure page pops up, and in red, you'll see a link to each unit. So the first unit, Getting a Fresh Start After Foreclosure, it's in PDF form. It'll tell you there's 11 pages and kind of gives you a brief sentence on what that chapter, that unit's all about.
And this is where all of our Spanish resources will be as well when we put those online. So it will be the same source. And we are going to be doing a presentation at AFCPE. We were actually the Mary O'Neill 2015 mini grant recipient, and it's actually the online credit courses is the mini grant project that we're doing. We've developed a series of videos that are going to go along with those online courses, and so we will be unveiling that resource and information at AFCPE this year, and we thank Barb O'Neill and AFCPE for that. That was a great opportunity for us to really build an additional piece to this project.
And Erica, would you or one of you answer the question about the evaluation and the indicators?
Yeah, evaluation and indicators is really interesting. So unfortunately, with an online PDF document, it's very hard to evaluate. And so right now, as the toolkit stands the way it is, there is not an evaluation portion that goes along with that. We have done some marketing research that we were able to do as a result of developing the toolkit and talking with key industry leaders and talking to groups to make sure that we were on target with the type of content that we had included in this. And so we talked with realtors, we talked with housing counselors, we talked with lenders to be able to identify, okay, based on what we have, are we meeting the needs, develop marketing messages to talk with their constituents. We hope that for the online credit course, we will be capturing indicators for that. And there's an easier way to do kind of a pre-post assessment. And so that will be built into the online course. But as far as the toolkit as it stands right now, we've thought of a variety of different things, but the best thing that we can do, and it's not very good, but is really capturing numbers of who is actually accessing the website. So that's where we stand at that point related to that. But we will be doing common indicators hopefully for the non-credit courses and be able to capture that information because each of those courses, once they complete, they'll get a certificate of completion. And in order to get that certificate, they're going to have to complete the evaluation as a part of that process. Resource list on the foreclosure statistics that we used in development of the program, we can definitely get you some information, Becky. We have some statistics that we used at the beginning. We also have some journal articles that are in process right now at a couple different outlets based on some of the research that we did in support of the toolkit. And so we can, hopefully, they're all in the revise and resubmit stage. So hopefully we'll have those soon related to that.
I also wanted to mention, Becky noted earlier in the chat about social media, and we have developed a couple of partner toolkits or partner packets with pre-made Twitter and Facebook messages that if any of you would be interested in those to help us promote the toolkit, you could contact Erica or Scott or myself, and we can forward those on to you.
And those were really developed based on that marketing research that I talked about that we did. So here's our information. Scott is actually one of our financial and homeownership education team leaders at this point, so his email is listed, and mine as the extension specialist is also listed. So if anybody has any questions at all, we're happy to answer it. If you have any opportunities where you would like to share this with your local state or any constituent groups, we're happy to share and help you promote this in your local community as well. And unfortunately in Michigan, we definitely dealt with this foreclosure crisis pretty significantly, and we developed it pretty early on in the recession. And so we kind of feel like we've had a little bit of a jump start in this for good or bad, but we definitely want to be able to share this information with other people as well because, unfortunately, like we've seen with other things in history, sometimes we repeat ourselves. And so I think, this would hopefully be something that we can use in the future and better able to support families who are going through this housing instability and challenge.
So I think we'll say last call for any questions, and so we'll stay on, give people a chance to do that. But on behalf of Financial Security for All and everyone who participated today, let me say thank you. It's a great set of resources, and I look forward to the online videos as well and learning more about it at AFCPE. Looks like Becky has a question about CEUs.
As far as for this webinar right now, is that the question?
I'm not sure.
We don't have any CEUs for this webinar right now. I guess I would deflect that question to Elizabeth.
Yeah, no. We can give you a certificate of completion of the webinar, and then you can go ahead and request CEUs on your own.
Okay.
So please email me if you need that certificate of completion.
Okay. Well, thank you guys very much. And like I said, if you have any questions as you go through, please let us know, or if there's any questions that you have as you're looking at the material, we're always open. The one thing that we have the luxury of with it being a PDF online material is that we hope to update this as needed as things change, and so we will be doing updates as we go through with that. So otherwise, thank you very much. And Elizabeth, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thanks. I did just put my email address in the chat box, DEKISS with the number 4 at ksu.edu. So please email me if you want to get a certificate of completion of the webinar. And I think we're good. We're about 12:26. So again, thanks to everyone for participating and to our presenters. And I think, Jeannie, we can stop the recording now.